Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so we got a good show for you guys today on this Wednesday. It's hump day. You know what that means? It means like half the week's over, and it's great. Okay, fun stuff. Like I said, we're going to talk about President Trump blaming his approval ratings. You'll never guess who he blames them on. We have truckers that were formerly for Trump against Trump, and you're going to love the reason why. Then we have a teacher in Texas getting fired for, and you'll love this, not understanding Twitter. Well, maybe that's part of the reason that's how she got caught, but we'll get into that story because it's a lot of fun. Then we've got more Biden stuff. Biden is not having a good week. I didn't talk about this lately, but there were some plagiarism charges. And now, of course, Biden comes out in favor of the Hyde Amendment, protecting that, and I think that's really important. We're going to talk about that. And then we have Bernie Sanders scaring the crap out of Walmart. I love it. All right. So, yeah, like I said, we got a lot of fun here. There should, like I said, be a lot of great comments and stuff to read. So hopefully you guys can put that in the chat so I can read those during the breaks. I kind of got like my thoughts kind of derailed for a second there, but I think we're back on track now. I got to show you some stuff that I think you'll enjoy before we get into the show, and that's some of the shirts that I've been talking about. I know I've been promising you some pictures of those stuff that you can get at our Teespring, so I just want to show you that real quick. That's our Impeach Trump shirt. I like it. It's fun stuff. Then we have our What If This Isn't Rock Bottom shirt. I think that's like a favorite. So a lot of people love that shirt. I do too. It's actually made by a friend of mine because I have no artistic skills whatsoever. So big credit to Dan Spearin for designing that. And then mine. Change begins with us. Because you can't have change without us. I mean, you can because of the spelling, but you know what I mean. So, yeah, I just wanted to show you guys... that stuff. Because, the shirts and stuff, merchandise, it's not only cool, but it also helps the show. And, of course, there are other ways that you can help the show. Patreon.com/TYTNation. I want to thank a few patrons before we get started. Marco Antonio Passamai, Sweet Cakes, Ross Mullins, Ethan Hattendorf, Janet Allen, and James Huth. Thank you to those patrons who support independent progressive media. The show literally cannot exist without you. All right. That said, now let's get into the fun stuff. All right. We'll go with President Trump. All right. Now, President Trump is still the most unpopular president in modern history. His current approval rating is somewhere around 40%. It's an average of about 43. And every time he has a bump in his approval ratings, it ends up going down probably about a week or so later, usually after he either says something stupid, discriminates against some other small minority group, or does something, did I mention does something stupid, or commits a crime. I think that's the third one. Now, it could be, of course, because he's an idiot, or that the fact the only legislative accomplishment that he has to come out of the Trump administration is giant tax cuts for rich people that have not actually helped anyone except for large, wealthy, CEOs, corporations, and CEOs and shareholders. Nonetheless, the president decided he was going to make some excuses for his consistently poor, very sad approval ratings as he ready to depart from a disastrous state visit to the UK. I've been talking about that visit. Again, it has been very sad and super, super embarrassing. Now, he, of course, took to his favorite medium, Twitter, to decry the press Quote, if the totally corrupt media was less corrupt, I would be up by 15 points in the polls based on our tremendous success with the economy. Maybe best ever. Now, look, I'm going to let you finish, Trump, but Bill Clinton had the best economy of all time. Or at least from what I can remember. Now, like, okay, Bill Clinton was horrible in about 100 different ways, right? But you can't say that the economy wasn't better under Bill Clinton than it is under Trump. It was pretty good back then. And of course, Clinton made some changes that led to our current predicament, but that, that's not really what I want to focus on here. I just wanted to make a Kanye joke. Anyway, he continues, if the corrupt media was actually fair, I would be up by 25 points. Now, first 15, but no, 15 wasn't good enough. No, it had to be 25. Okay, fun. Now, nevertheless, he continues, despite fake news, we're doing great. Well, then why are you complaining and saying that I would be up by 25% or 15% if you were already doing great? And by the way, 43%, that's his average polling number. That is not great. That is abysmal. That is terrible. He has never cracked 50%, which most other presidents have been able to do so, but not Trump. He is deeply, deeply unpopular. Sad. But now look, he says, and he only says that the media isn't fair because they don't kiss his ass like Fox News. Fox News, every day you turn it on, and there's Hannity kissing his ass. There's that one guy that I always seem to forget his name, Lou Dobbs, that always kisses his ass. I mean, look, he's got that, most of that channel. Look, to be fair, some of the hosts do a pretty decent job. Chris Wallace, from time to time, even though he's deeply conservative, and I disagree with him, he at least agrees on facts. And then Shepard Smith. But most of the other hosts, Marita Bartiromo, terrible. I think she's like Fox Business or CNBC now or whatever. But nonetheless, disaster, right? But most of Fox News kisses his ass. And now, here's the thing. I actually criticize the media as well, but I do not do it for the same reason of Trump, that Trump does. They're basically a protector of the status quo, protectors of the establishment. And so that's why you see so much hate against Bernie Sanders and people who want to change the system. And for example, Politico has just been on a tear against Bernie Sanders, The Hill, etc. All these establishment outlets are pushing Biden and attacking Sanders. And so, look, if you want to push back against that, their establishment bias, perfectly fine. But that is not the reason Trump does it. No, he wants to use them to explain away his terrible poll numbers. That's what he does. I must have a scapegoat because nothing can ever be my fault. And that's the way he runs. Now, maybe after this, his most ardent supporters will defend him. But most people are not buying his explanation. For example, on Twitter, Andy Wheatley actually had a criticism on this. Surprise. Hey, it's the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Glad to see your priorities. Well, there you go. Otto English said, give it a rest. It's D-Day today, and we're commemorating that. Show a little dignity and decorum for 24 hours. To that I say, who do you think you're dealing with? Really? He continues, you're the 72-year-old leader of the free world, not a hysterical teenager complaining about how unfair everything is. Oh, no, yeah. No, he is basically the hysterical teenager. Yeah. Roger says, you're just saying random numbers now. 27 Starlord says, wow, 15 points, 25 points. I just can't wait for the wholly accurate Donald Trump predictive polling company to finally be announced. And I'm sure it would be tremendous. It would come as a great relief to the American people against the fake news media machine, always skewing the polls, unless they're positive polls of Donald Trump. Lion King Lee says, but your impeachment ratings are way up. Good job, buddy. Christine Kennedy basically says, toddler in chief. Basically. Dr. Mindermass says approval rating is based on more than just the economy, pointing out something serious. It doesn't matter how good the job numbers look if you're still an execrable human being. I can't say that word. I said that word earlier. I cannot say that word now. I have a difficult time with that. But it's a good tweet anyway. Roger Phillips says, so it's a bit like huge crowds that welcomed you in London. The only crowds were those demonstrating against you. I didn't get to cover that story. But basically, he's like, what? I didn't see any crowds. What crowds? And then like 2 seconds later, he's like, I saw the crowds. They were very small. I thought you just said, see, that's what Donald Trump does. He contradicts himself several times in the same like span of a few seconds. It's really, it's a skill, man. One that I would hope I would never have to master. Okay, anyway. Now, Sven Henrik says, maybe try some politics of inclusion, not constant division. Just a thought. Yeah, but then that's actually hard, and it's just easier to throw out red meat to the base. Darren Bell asks, can you go one single day without whining? Just one day would be nice. Some of us need a break. I hear you on that, brother. Thorsten says, Trump's response to the 75th D-Day anniversary today. So what did he do? Does he condemn war? Does he sympathize with the veterans? Or does he fight the media? Well, we know the answer to that. And finally, not finally, but Tom said, if only the media did not report on things I did and said. Yeah, I know it'd be so much easier, wouldn't it, for him? And finally, Caro says, even when not in the USA, Trump is a whiny little baby. Sad baby. That's who Donald Trump is. Okay. So let's go to the truckers. Here we go. Just reading a couple of comments here. Oh, don't worry. I'll read those after the break. All right. Now, MSNBC recently spoke to a group of truck drivers who say that President Trump has not kept his campaign promises. Wow, shocker. I think we've all realized that by now. Now, they're specifically going after Trump, of course, for some of the economic changes, because he had recently claimed that his economy was, quote, the best ever. I mean, this economy is the greatest economy that has ever existed. It has been tremendous. Now, those of us living in the real world that are suffering through stagnant wages and job losses, look at that and we kind of scratch our heads and go, wait a minute. That would appear to be false. That would appear to be a lie. It appears the economy is not that great. It's great for people on Wall Street, Fortune 500 CEO, or Fortune 500 company CEOs are actually doing incredibly well. Stock buybacks are, have exceeded all expectations. And so if you're a wealthy person in Trump's America, you're doing fantastic. If you're a trucker, not so much. So now we go to a video here with MSNBC's Morgan Radford, who spoke to a group of truckers who said, you know what? No, turns out the economy is not so good. And some of those truckers were Trump voters who said that they were not expected to vote for the president again. Now, I want to go to this video of Morgan Radford. She does a pretty good job breaking down why these truckers will not vote for Trump. But I want you to, I also want to show you the reactions here. So check this out.
Do you feel like this administration is listening to you as truckers?
No, ma'am.
No, they're not listening, not at all.
A mix of Republicans, Democrats, and independents.
How many of you voted for the president in the last election? 1, 2, 3.
Many of their complaints are unique to trucking, like parking costs and a lack of training for new drivers.
You'll receive.
But they say some of their issues affect all Americans, like the Republican-led tax bill.
How many of you, by a show of hands, saw your taxes increase this year?
They all went up, yeah.
1, 2.
Yeah, this year they went
1,
up.
2.
Yeah.
All of you? So most of you saw your taxes increase.
The reason? Something called a per diem. In the past, truckers could deduct things like food and daily expenses from their taxable income. Now, with Trump's new tax bill, they no longer can.
I have a young family at home, and with our per diem, they took the per diem out. That made an $8,000 difference.
$8,000.
What I personally paid.
So what were you paying in taxes last year?
Nothing.
A hit that comes especially hard after promises made by the president.
America first means putting American truckers first.
You said you also believe the president would help truckers. Do you think he's doing a good job now?
No, I don't. I mean, there's nothing that he's doing to help us out here in any way possible. I mean, none.
Mr. Trump ran on the platform of doing away with the Obama bad regulations. Well, he quite well done that for, I'm going to say corporate America, but us blue-collar America, we've got regulations that we had when Obama was in office. And I would like to ask him, why didn't he do away with the bad regulations for us, the independent owner-operator?
You know, I have an answer for him. It's because Donald Trump had lied. He lied to you. He's got no idea what he's doing, other than, of course, trying to stuff his pockets full of your money. That's what Donald Trump does. Now, the things that he got in the tax bill, Donald Trump personally benefits from that. I mean, you won't unless you are a multinational corporation or a large CEO. If you're a trucker or the owner of a small business, it is very likely that you got almost no help, if any, at all. Because, by the way, you're not the focus of this. The focus of these tax cuts, as is most of Trump's policies, are aimed at helping the rich or himself. As for regulations, look, I'm actually going to break with slightly established progressive orthodoxy. I'm going to point out how not every regulation is good. Now, regulations are rules, right? And there's a lot of good rules. There's a lot of good regulations, and there are a lot of regulations that even mean well, but might not work right. And then there are also a problem with redundant regulations, things that are just stacked on top of each other. So, again, not every regulation is a good regulation, but I think most are needed because we do need rules. We need ground rules, and we need those that actually protect regular people, protect workers, etc., right? Now, there are some rules that are put in there by big business through their corporate lobbying to stifle their competition. That's an example of some of the bad rules. And those make it harder for the little guy to operate and become a big business and become successful. All of that goes to help big corporations. And then, of course, you also get into overregulation. That's meant to shut down certain things. For example, Republicans, champions of supposed eliminating regulations, are actually using overregulation to try to kill Planned Parenthood and try to end abortion rights. They've been doing it all over the different states, using these overregulations, government, big government coming in and overregulating and using the power of big government to destroy abortion rights, to, close down these clinics and make people in these states unable to access abortion services, and not even abortion services, by the way. There are a lot of, Planned Parenthood clinics that don't actually do abortion that still get shut down, even though all they do is cancer screenings and provide, contraception coverage, and do all these positive things for the community, for, poor women or low-income women and men in the community, and they still get shut down because of the overregulation. It's insane. Now, not all regulations, as I said, are good regulations, but you actually have to look into that as a lawmaker and do maybe a cost-benefit analysis. Is this effective at doing what we want it to do? Or examine the pros and cons, right? Now, to answer the trucker's question, why didn't he get rid of the Obama regulations for us, but why did he get rid of the ones for corporate America? Well, it's because he never cared to do it. I mean, if you thought he was going to do that, no. He's not going to look into regulations. He's a one-pager kind of guy. He barely reads, and all he does during his executive time is watch Fox News while jamming cheeseburgers into his mouth hole. That's it. He does not read up on what could actually help you, regular people. He barely even works. All he does is basically go out there and campaign. I mean, what has he been doing? All the rallies. I mean, he was doing rallies pretty much after he was elected. Still out there doing rallies, talking to people. That's the only part of the job that Trump does because it's the only part that he actually enjoys. He lets everybody else do the actual work so long as it helps him, right? And he demands that the people that work with him either make him look good or, come up with policy that benefits him personally and most likely financially. And that's what it is. And look, if you voted for him and you're not rich, well, guess what? You just got scammed. Plain and simple. And look, you shouldn't feel bad about that. I mean, you shouldn't feel embarrassed. He's a con man. That's what he does. That's who he is. And he has run cons and scams for decades because he could never make money the legitimate way. Remember, this guy owned casinos and he still managed to crash a casino, bankrupt a casino. The house always wins. And yet somehow, he's too stupid to actually make a casino run. I mean, the only time the way he runs a casino is right into the ground. He went bankrupt 6 times. He has no idea what he's doing. But he does know how to scam people because he knows how to talk. Not like incoherent full sentences, but somehow he knows how to reach certain people with the words that he uses in the way that he talks. And I'm not sure how, but there are some people that look at that and say, yes, that guy understands. And apparently some of these truckers got that message. But as usual, they got scammed. And of course, now, the good thing about this, though, this entire situation, this video specifically, is there are people that are continuing to wake up. They're realizing, yes, we got scammed, we got screwed over. The Republicans are not on our side. Donald Trump's only legislative achievement, and I say that, air quotes and all, was tax cuts for the rich. You're not going to win an election on that, especially when regular people are feeling the squeeze and they're not necessarily in favor of rich people getting more money. So he's going to have a real tough time trying to sell that to the truckers and to anyone else who is not wealthy and who voted for him. He's in a world of trouble come this next election, and I hope he realizes it. And I hope it makes him sweat. And I hope it makes him, I hope it makes it hard for him to sleep. Okay. All right. Let's move on. One more story, and then we'll hit the break. I don't know why I didn't say bad teacher. Should have caught that earlier, but okay. Anyway. A Texas school board unanimously voted to fire a teacher who attempted to report undocumented students in her school district through a series of public tweets. Now, this happened in the Fort Worth Independent School District, who voted 8-0 to terminate the employment of a woman named Georgia Clark at a special meeting on Tuesday. Now, Clark, who is an English teacher at Amon Carter Riverside High School, tweeted that the school that she worked at had been, quote, taken over by illegal students from Mexico, and that Trump was elected on the promise that a wall would be built to protect our borders. So you can see sort of the problem here. Now, look, the reason that she was fired was not because she held those specific beliefs, as I'm going to explain to you later. No, these tweets got a lot of public attention because basically this woman, while thinking that she was speaking to Donald Trump directly, had actually doxed herself. She gave out her full name and her phone number, thinking that Donald Trump was going to call her up so they can discuss how to get rid of these illegals. That's crazy. Now, the tweet started gaining attention last week, and Clark's account was deleted May 29th, and she was placed on administrative leave after the school district had become aware of them. Now, the tweets were bad. Let me give you some of the information in there without doing any sort of compromising information like her phone number, etc. In these messages, she claimed that her school had been taken over, as I said before, by illegals from Mexico, although she said they were illegal drug dealers from Mexico, and that the principal of the school was protecting those people from prosecution, and that everybody in the area was protecting basically these horrible people, these undocumented immigrants, along with their drug dealers, and all she was doing is trying to do her duty to report them to the authorities so they can be deported. And that's what she was saying. She was also claiming, I came to you because I didn't want reprisal, which is ironic because reprisal is basically what she got. Now, these were all public, which is not a smart thing if you want to avoid recrimination. Now, here's the thing. She thought that she was sending private messages to the president. And it was a lack of understanding of how Twitter works. That's how she got caught. According to district documents, Clark told the investigators that she thought that the tweets were direct messages to Trump and did not know that they were public. Well, thank goodness for her not being tech savvy, or we never would have found out that this teacher, who, as I'm going to explain, has a really big role in the face of lots of Latino students in her district, didn't know technology, was not very tech savvy. Now, here's the thing. I also agree with this firing because, again, she's living in a completely different reality where anybody who's Latino is illegal and probably a drug dealer. And also because this isn't her first rodeo. This isn't her first problem with race. She was suspended back in 2013 after she allegedly referred to a group of students as Little Mexico and another student as white bread. That's really strange. Nonetheless, you should not be calling your students those kind of names. Clark is also under investigation after she allegedly told the student to, quote, show me your papers, you are illegal, after the student simply asked for permission to use the bathroom. Really? Really? Hey, Clark, I need to use the bathroom. Where are your papers? Show me your papers. Papers, please. You are illegal. You will be deported. I just want to pee. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. This whole thing. I mean, come on, man. And here's the worst part, right? As I mentioned, there is a large Latino population. The Hispanic student population in the Fort Worth Independent School District is 63%. Over half of all students are Latino. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram also reported that about 88% of the students at the school Clark had been teaching at are Hispanic. That is an overwhelming majority. And yet, here's this teacher who was apparently deeply racist teaching them. I mean, do you really think that they ended up getting a quality education from Miss Clark? I would guess not, but then again, I don't necessarily know. But thankfully, the board unanimously voted to fire her 8-0, which means, of course, she is out of a job, but will likely find a job in the Trump administration soon. That's just my guess. Look, this is another reminder, man, that these people, they do exist. And thank goodness they are not very smart. There is one thing that really binds racists together is that there are so many of them that are just not very smart. I mean, then again, if you think that one race is better than the other, generally you don't quite understand how things work, and you're probably not a smart person to begin with. And the other good thing about them being smart is they usually mess up. And it makes it pretty easy to to find them and to get them out of some of these high positions. Now, again, the reason is because she had so much power and influence over these children. Again, children spend, so many hours at school trying to learn and around these people that they have such a profound impact in these people's lives. Wouldn't it be great to have them around teachers who actually cared about them and didn't just consider them terrible people because they might be undocumented? And we don't even necessarily know if those people are undocumented. But she assumes simply because they were Latino. No, they deserve a teacher that will actually allow these kids to have a good education and success later in life. Because that's what they deserve, and that's what old children deserve. Okay. I'm going to take a break. We'll come back. We got a Biden story here for you guys. Yes, more negative Biden stuff. I don't plan it. It's just what's in the news. So we'll talk about that. And then, of course, we'll talk about Bernie Sanders versus Walmart, the shareholders, him challenging them to their face. It's awesome. So leave your comments, super chats. We'll read those right after the break. Around the Nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so I'm going to read some fun comments here from you guys, starting with a member comment from Starge Tech. This is the Trump family scamming and robbing people since 1923. It's a good tagline there. Then a bunch of non-member comments that I found really fun. Gogogini points out a lot of food rots because of the lack of regulation and upholding regulations. That's also a good point. Enforcement is another issue that I didn't talk about, but you're right. It is important. Kira Jade says, for the teacher that was fired, watch, she'll be hired by Betsy DeVos. Another great comment that I did not think about. Betsy DeVos destroying the education system. One terrible law at a time, or rollback of a law at a time, especially when it comes to like sexual harassment and of course, rape on campus, which is really important. Tia Wheeler said the sad thing is that there are teachers across the country who feel that way about their non-white students. It's disgusting. That's true. And you know, you generally want to think of teachers as being non-biased or not racist and just wanting and caring about the well-being of their students. But then you realize that no, I mean, they're people too. And sometimes they're bad people. And generally, I'm in favor of teachers, in favor of nurses, and generally, and the reason I mention nurses is because there's people that are nurses too, and sometimes people are bad. But generally, they are good, for the most part. And so, it's just, when you think about just normal human failings, and yes, I consider racism a failing, a hard fail. And it gets you kind of depressed because you never know the people that maybe are helping you and are nice to you, especially as a cis white guy, that it may be terrible to people who don't look like me, and that sucks. Anyway, it's a bit of a sobering thought. Finally, Mr. Elder Scrolls in Fallout says, you can tell she's a Republican because she gave out her name and number. So stupid. Stupidity, it's a constant on the right. I know. I was like, oh my God, she gave out her actual phone number on the internet. Oh, that's a disaster. Oh my God. It's a good thing they didn't give out her address. She literally doxed herself. Terrible. All right, anyway. And I'm so surprised that some of the places that you get this from, the tweets are all deleted, but some of the journalists still have them, and they did not block out the phone numbers. I'm like, come on, guys. I understand she's a horrible, bigoted racist, but you kind of open people up to terrible things, harassment, and like we shouldn't do that on the right, on the left. Okay, that's generally what the right wing does, and so we don't want to be like that. Okay, anyway. So now, before we get back into the show, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. It helps us out greatly. And I think I want to see about giving a shout out to channel members too. Because there's patrons and then there's channel memberships. That's another way that you can help the show. Let's see. Yes, we've got one new member. So many mods, so little time is one of the new channel members. So if you want to be a channel member, just hit the join button at the bottom of the screen. Okay. So let's go after Biden, shall we? As if we haven't done that enough lately. But this is important, as they all are. And so I want to let you know what Biden's about, since he is considered the Democratic front runner, and hopefully not for long. Okay. The former vice president and 2020 presidential candidate Joe Biden is not having a good week. Now, this is fresh off plagiarism allegations involving his campaign's positions. Recently, he came out with a climate change program that appeared to have whole sections that were lifted off of other campaigns' plans. And also, it seems that the same thing is happening with education. Now, plagiarism is not a new charge against Joe Biden. as he had been charged with it back in the 80s, I believe. It was 88 or in the 90s as well. So he's had a long history of being charged with plagiarism. Now, he is also in hot water with progressive groups for supporting a controversial amendment that blocks federal money from being used for abortions. That is the Hyde Amendment. Now, Biden's campaign confirmed that on Wednesday that he still supports the Hyde Amendment, a revelation that has generated intense criticism from women's rights groups. According to Common Dreams, Biden supported the policy 43 years after it was first signed into law. It's a sign that former vice president is out of step with the party. Now, what's interesting is he said, I'm kind of open to getting rid of the Hyde Amendment, but also I'm in favor of the Hyde Amendment. So, okay, now wait a minute here. So you're in favor of getting rid of it, but you're also in favor of keeping it. That seems to be a direct contradiction. But first, I'm going to give you, before I get into that, I want to read New York Magazine writer Rebecca Traister, who tweeted this about Biden, quote, "This puts him at odds with his own party's platform at this point," and also added that Biden's position puts him at, quote, "also at odds with a morally coherent position." So basically that position, of course, is women's bodily autonomy. And, of course, it's really important in the era of Me Too. It's always been important, but now it's in the forefront where people are looking at women's rights as human rights, as they should. Now, you might be asking, wait, Hyde Amendment? What's wrong with the Hyde Amendment? It basically says that my federal tax money should not be used for abortions. Well, maybe I am pro-life and I don't want my federal money, my taxpayer money, to go to abortions. Well, the problem is that it blocks people from marginalized communities from being able to obtain abortion services. Now, I'm guessing if you're a pro-life individual, that's not a bug, it's a feature. They're like, yeah, I don't want anybody to get abortions, especially poor people who can't afford babies. Wait. Again, these are mainly poor, white, and also minority communities that are affected. Now, you would naturally think that in those areas, access to abortion services would be beneficial in helping these people not to sink into further poverty by having children they're unable to afford. Right? No, apparently the Hyde Amendment and people who support it want to cut these people off access to services which are otherwise not accessible except for in the case of rape or incest. So those are the few circumstances where people can access federal money for abortion services. But it's not really enough. Again, this is bodily autonomy here, and maybe we should consider eliminating that, not consider eliminating. Maybe people should consider the effects of not eliminating the Hyde Amendment, of what we see now. And, of course, what we see now is the black and brown community especially being impacted by this heavily in a very negative way. Now, Biden's campaign, in an article of how the current primary frontrunner has changed his views on abortion, told an NBC reporter that barring an overturning of choice nationwide, the president will still support Hyde. So as long as Roe versus Wade is still there, then he is in favor of the Hyde Amendment. Well, it's very unlikely that the Republicans are going to try to, or going to be able to get rid of Roe versus Wade. They certainly are going to attempt to try. But he says, well, if we have Roe versus Wade, then yeah, so of course I'm for the Hyde Amendment. Okay, but also he says, I do personally support Hyde, and so I won't fight to overturn it. So basically this is do-nothing status quo if he gets into office. But that is the history of Joe Biden. He is the do-nothing status quo candidate. He is not a progressive. And if you look into his past, you can see he's never been progressive on this issue, among many other issues. As a U.S. Senator from Delaware, a New York Times article pointed out, Biden voted against the 1977 compromise that allowed Medicaid to fund abortions that included exceptions for victims of rape and incest, in addition for concerns for the life of the mother. Understand that. He voted against that compromise bill that allowed those exceptions. Now, while the rape and incest exceptions passed in that case, thank goodness, Biden in 1981 again voted to remove those exceptions in what was the most far-reaching ban on federal funds ever enacted by Congress. Biden also voted several times, including in 1983, to prohibit federal workers from using health insurance on abortion services, with the only exception being to save the life of the mother. Now look, health insurance, right? That's not taxpayer money. That's your money that you pay into your insurance company. And still, no, you can't use your money, according to Joe Biden, that you pay into your insurance. You can't use that for an abortion. You just can't. Sashay away, Joe, in the words of AOC. Now, his opposition, of course, is mostly for turning the Hyde Amendment, right? Now, what's funny is that when Joe Biden was voting against that, those compromise bills allowing Medicaid to fund abortions, Bernie Sanders was arguing that, hey, maybe we should expand choice. Because Bernie Sanders, of course, has been consistent over the ages, right? Over the last 40 years. That's why people like Bernie Sanders. He hasn't had to evolve to these positions. He has been at these positions through his entire career. So, if you wonder why people like Bernie Sanders and want to choose him over Joe Biden, that is why. Consistency. Instead of Joe having to slowly evolve over the decades. And in the case of this, the Hyde Amendment, not evolve at all. Now, here's the thing. That's the difference, right, between Bernie Sanders and someone like Bernie Sanders. And it's not just Bernie. Of course, it's a lot of the other Democrats that are running that have taken the pro-choice position even more than Biden. Now, Biden, of course, he's a Catholic. Well, okay, look, if he's going to be personally against abortion, I think that's fine. You know what? If you have if you're personally against abortion, then don't have one. I mean, that's fairly simple, right? You shouldn't legislate someone else. That's a pro-choice position. You want to be pro-choice in your life. You want to keep that baby, that's great. I like that. Now, Bernie Sanders is also pro-choice, and he says, yes, you want to keep that baby? Keep that baby. In fact, we want you to keep that baby, so we're going to help fund healthcare and education for that child for the rest of your life. But Bernie Sanders and progressives also say, but if you don't want to have that baby, then that's okay too. That's not our choice to make. That is not the government's choice to make. If you have it, good. We'll help you take care of it. If you don't, that's fine. That is your choice. That's the whole point. Now, after this had come out, Biden got a lot of flack from progressive groups, not least the ACLU. Now, the ACLU had recently celebrated Biden, promising to repeal the Hyde Amendment in April during a campaign event. Now, apparently there seems to have been a little bit of a mix-up on that. Biden's campaign told the Hill the former vice president had, quote, misheard a question from an ACLU volunteer who talked about the Hyde Amendment, although Biden had apparently thought that she was referring to the Mexico City rule, which prevents federal aid money from going to organizations overseas that perform abortions. Now, this led, of course, progressives and pro-choice advocates slamming Biden. In a series of tweets, Rewire news editor-in-chief Jody Jacobson said that Biden's position showed a, quote, lack of understanding of what Hyde did under the best of circumstances and a total misread of the current political movement. Even with Roe intact, she says, even if there were not myriad of obstacles to abortion care, despite Roe being intact, Hyde still harms people of color and low-income people who can't access abortion care. This response is even further out of touch than it seems at first glance. I'd like to put it out there, Vogue editor Michelle Ruiz said, that this guy ain't it. Agreed. Narrow Pro-Choice America President Elise Hogue said this, quote, there's no political or ideological excuse for Joe Biden's support for the Hyde Amendment, which translates into discrimination against poor women and women of color, plain and simple. His position further endangers women and families already facing enormous hurdles and creates two classes of rights for people in this country, which is inherently undemocratic. Now, again, if somebody who has money, they want to get an abortion, they can. somebody who doesn't have money, they want to get an abortion, they can't because they can't afford it. That's why it's important to allow, federal money to be used for abortion services. And of course, that's what Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill includes, by the way. It eliminates the Hyde Amendment and allows funding for all reproductive services, including abortion, to be funded through taxpayer money. Now, speaking of democracy, right? So you might say, well, look, Joe Biden, he's trying to appeal to everybody, right? He's the moderate. He's the centrist. He's trying to be in the center of the country. And most of the country just can't be in favor of allowing taxpayer money to fund abortions, right? Well, no, you're wrong. A 2016 poll conducted by Hart Research Associates for All Above All, a coalition of organizations working to end insurance coverage bans in abortion, found that 76% of voters agreed with this statement. Quote, however we feel about abortion, politicians should not be allowed to deny a woman's health coverage for it just because she is poor. The voters who agreed included 76% of independents, 66% of Republicans, and 89% of Democrats. Voters also said that they would support a bill, that would require Medicaid to cover all pregnancy-related care, including abortions, by a margin of 53 to 41%. So here's voters saying, yes, we would support federal money, in this case, Medicaid, to cover all pregnancy care, including abortion. And that is a small majority of the American people. And look, the support for the support for the repeal of Hyde is also really, really strong among millennials and, of course, African Americans. So now, in case you think that it's not going to play well in the heartland, which is probably what the Biden campaign is going to say, the poll did focus on the battleground states of Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Michigan, New Hampshire, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Wisconsin. So that poll, which had overwhelming support for repealing Hyde and allowing Medicaid to cover even abortions, played well in all of those different states. Among young people, among people of color, they agree the Hyde Amendment has got to go. But unfortunately, that's not who Biden is aiming for. He wants older, more conservative voters, the moderate Republicans that are turned off by Donald Trump. That's who he wants to vote for him. Now, do you remember who else went for those voters? Oh, right, Hillary Clinton. You know how it went? It actually went terribly. Once again, Joe Biden shows that he just doesn't get it and why he should not be the Democratic nominee. Okay. Real quick here. Go to Bernie Sanders. Okay. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders is at it again, this time scaring Walmart CEO Doug McMillon into calling on Congress to raise the minimum wage. Now, this coincided with a shareholders meeting in which Sanders had crashed. Now, he'd actually was invited to this meeting by a woman named Kat Davis. Now, this was a Walmart employee for more than a decade, and she asked him to be her proxy in order to make the case for a plan that would put hourly associates on the corporate board. Now, that corporate board currently includes high-ranking executives from places like McDonald's. Why is the McDonald's executive sitting on the Walmart board? That's weird. Not only that, but he also called to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So Bernie Sanders basically got to make his case right to the board. Oh, that's awesome. Now, before that happened, the CEO, Doug McMillon, said this, quote, the federal minimum wage is lagging behind. $7.25 is too low. It's time for Congress to put a thoughtful plan in place to increase the minimum wage. Any plan should take into account phasing and cost of living differences to avoid unintended consequences. Now, here you have a CEO of a major corporation basically being scared so much by progressive power that they're like, okay. Yes, we should have a higher minimum wage. But what? It should take into account phasing and cost of living differences. Because, basically what that means is that in places like Arkansas, the minimum wage could actually be lower than $50 an hour. But it also means that in places like California, for example, LA, San Francisco, that minimum wage should be much higher than $15 an hour. And that makes, to be honest, a certain amount of sense. Because mainly I want to see places reflect the cost of living so that it can truly be a living wage. Again, that would mean California, San Francisco would probably go up to $22, $25 an hour, which is absolutely fine because that economy can handle that. But it also does help, I think, in a way, or is at least designed to help states like Arkansas with a much lower standard of living and still allow these workers to make enough money to live. So not too bad, right? I'll take it for now because, again, this does show that Bernie Sanders is having, and the progressive movement is having a huge impact on some of these shareholders. Now, I also want to talk about the timing here, right? It is interesting timing that the day that Bernie Sanders shows up and gives a speech about raising the minimum wage and also about putting workers on the corporate board, here comes the this chief executive saying, we should do some minimum wage. Now, it's curious why he didn't actually also talk about putting people on the board. So there's two things going on, as I said. They're scared of Bernie because of the immense political power. That is something that Politico, by the way, and other similar outlets seem to ignore with all those hit pieces of, Bernie Sanders. Bernie is fading. The incredible shrinking Bernie Sanders. That's a Politico headline. Which, by the way, he's not shrinking. Elizabeth Warren is gaining in the polls because she actually has something that most of the other candidates don't, and that is an idea for basically everything. So, yes, she is gaining in the polls, and it's good to see that, what's winning the primary? Ideas. Bernie Sanders has ideas, and so does Elizabeth Warren. That is not taking away from Bernie Sanders her rise. In fact, Biden's rise, or I should say Biden's, who's the current frontrunner, his poll numbers have actually taken a dive. He's lost 7 points. So in the latest rankings. But anyway, no, the second thing is, and this was really important, they wanted to draw away from basically the idea of filling their corporate board full of workers. I mean, come on, right? Now, Sanders explains to CNN, quote, putting workers on the Walmart board is enormously important because at the end of the day, working people have got to have some control over how they spend at least 8 hours a day. They cannot simply be cogs in a machine. To be a human being means that you have some ability to control your life, and that includes your work life. Now, that was, of course, an earlier interview of Bernie Sanders before he went to make his case in front of the board. And look, when it comes to that policy, I love it. I know. Putting workers on the board, and I know heads are going to explode, it's actually really good for the company. Now, right now, CEOs and board members only represent themselves. They represent shareholders, right? That means the companies are going to focus on short-term profits so they can get rich as fast as possible. Now, the problem with that is that it does not look at the long-term health of the company. Now, if you put in the workers to the board to advocate for themselves and give them power of the decision-making in the company, they're going to make less short-term profit. That is one thing, right? Oh, no, my short-term profit. But what would happen with that is that they would make better long-term decisions. So the company would be more viable in the long run because workers, basically what they want is they want a stable job at a decent wage. And so they're going to be in favor and they're going to vote for policies that keep the company running and allow them to continue their jobs. That's going to create stability for workers, but it's also going to be good for shareholders and executives because that means good long-term profits. Everybody wins. There will be profit, but it won't be as obscene as it is now. And it also might lead to less companies crashing and going bankrupt, and maybe less recessions as well. This is what they do in Germany, and it has some success. And so we can look and learn a lot from labor movements in other places in America. And some of these places have a lot better outcomes for regular working people. That's something to, take into, that we should look at. We should really kind of examine and emulate, I think. Now, finally, Bernie Sanders, in doing this, also shows what kind of a president he would be. Somebody who was there to enact change and also use his political power to get better outcomes for workers and for companies themselves. Medicare for All, great example. Helps regular people, helps workers, so they don't have to stay at the same job in order to keep their health benefits. But it also helps the companies because they no longer have to promise health benefits. And so that saves them money as well. Again, I think it's good for pretty much everybody, these policies. And now the other thing, of course, is that the fact that these companies are also bowing from pressure or bowing to pressure from him shows that these policies are, of course, incredibly popular and that he has a lot of power thanks to the progressive movement and thanks to, of course, populism. And that shows that he is willing and ready to fight for the people and that he will. And that will help everyone. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Please like and share if you haven't already. Thank you guys. Please consider becoming a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation. Those t-shirts are kind of cool. So check those out. That's at our Teespring store. Support independent, progressive, grassroots media. Thank you, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you guys tomorrow.